Welcome to episode 465 of Salcedo Paranormal, and tonight I'm continuing my review of the complete books of Charles Fort. As always, you can find all episodes of the show along with links to social media and other ways to contact me at the podcast page, and that is salcedoparanormal.podbean.com. That's SALSIDO paranormal.podbean.com. Always happy to hear from you all whether you have comments or questions or topic suggestions or stories of paranormal experiences, whether they're from you or someone else you trust. Happy to either read those or have you join me on the show to talk about them. Thank you all for listening, whether you are here for the live streams on Discord or if you listen on the podcast or YouTube feeds or on the Troubled Minds Radio Network, KUAP Digital Broadcasting. There you can hear replays of the show, 2 episodes every night at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, right before Troubled Minds Radio comes on. I always want to thank Michael Strange, host of Troubled Minds Radio, as well as Liam Martin, host of the Exile Minds podcast, for producing the show and putting it up on the station. If you'd like to help out the show, there are some different ways to do that. You can always share the show with others. Rate and review the show on your podcast platform of choice. You can also find some books I've written, paranormal fiction and nonfiction, over on Amazon. Also, if you would like extra content, extra shows, you can join the Patreon for the show and get at least one extra episode of the True Paranormal Stories from the Web shows per month. Hopefully coming soon. It'll be weekly, or at least mostly weekly, as time allows. Also, if you'd just like to make a one-time donation, you can always do that through PayPal or Venmo. And all this help is always appreciated but never expected. But there are expenses in doing the show and making it, continuing to make it better, such as equipment and research materials, and then travel expenses as well. I'll be going to the Mid-Michigan Paracon this November 4th and 5th. That is a Saturday and Sunday over at the Soaring Eagle Casino and Resort in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. And I'll be going there to do some recordings of myself and anyone else who wants to be recorded, talking about the paranormal and our thoughts on it, and then possibly experiences as well. And then I'll bring those recordings back and share them on the show. I think that covers everything. So let me get to the material here. I did want to say again, I will be releasing one extra show, as far as that's the plan as of right now, on Friday morning. And that will be another listener experiences show, which are always amazing to do. So looking forward to that. And then also looking forward to, hopefully soon, probably this weekend if I can, if possible, I will be recording more content for Patreon. So I think that takes care of everything. So let me get to this material here. We're still on Charles Fort's The Book of the Damned. And either we'll finish that one today or we'll get close. But there's still 3 other books within this whole larger book to get through, so there's still a ways to go. So chapter 16 here, and these are all summaries generated by AI summarizing tools. So just keep that in mind, and they can still be interesting. So here we go with this. Chapter 16 discusses various reported sightings of unusual objects and even beings in the sky, including luminous bodies and star-like objects, also creatures with wings, among other things. So, says many of these sightings are dismissed or explained away by scientists and astronomers as being mundane things like seeds, birds, locusts, and other things. Of course, that's basically just the mundane explanations that may not always explain everything away. So there's a mention also of a photograph taken of an object. It was taken at an observatory in Mexico in 1883. That seems to show a winged, elongated object crossing the sun. And this is presented as possible evidence for extraordinary flying objects or beings in the sky. So, let's see here. There's, I think that covers that section, basically. The rest is sort of summarizing the for its usual problems with the mainstream scientists and everything. But there are, again, just mentions again, there are reports of all kinds of sightings of things in the air and the sky, and the possible metaphysical and speculative, basically the possibilities of what they could be other than just sort of traditional scientific explanations there. So going on to the next section here, 17. This next section discusses numerous historical reports of strange sightings and events coinciding with earthquakes, including unusual clouds, darkness, lights in the sky, meteors, and falls of rocks or other objects. So this is sort of taking what he's already talked about, Fort has already talked about throughout the book. Odd things falling from the sky, and then throwing in earthquakes that apparently happen around the same time. So Fort argues that these things challenge the rational, conventional thinking that earthquakes are solely internally caused geologic events. Instead, he posits that quakes can be induced by the close passage of other celestial bodies or worlds. So that's a really amazing idea there. Of course, I have no idea how that would work or how that would not be more easy to sort of prove or disprove, but just the concept of that is amazing. And terrifying in a way. You don't really want worlds going that close to each other. But Fort presents reports of fish inexplicably, that's a hard word to say. I don't think I'll be saying that word much anymore. Falling from the sky during quakes as evidence, suggesting entire lakes may be disrupted on another world and the contents shaken loose. So again, going back to the idea that there are other things out there that we just somehow are not seeing or sensing or detecting. Other reported earthquakes, events include, there's a word that I've never seen before. Anyway, include eclipses of the sun, sulfuric odors, luminous clouds, so lights, basically clouds sort of giving off light, I guess, and even mysterious lights interpreted as aerial visitors. Now, I have heard, and I don't know a lot about this, but one possible regular explanation for some lights that are seen around earthquakes, and I believe it's piezoelectricity. It's this idea that the physical movement of the earth, parts of the earth, can generate energy that is then seen as lights, I believe, if I'm not mistaken on that. I may have to look into that and then sort of report back on that next time. But I've heard of that kind of thing as a possible explanation to things. And again, it's not that I'm ever looking only to sort of explain everything as paranormal. So if that's the case, then even that is still amazing that the planet itself was able to generate lights like that. So I lost my spot. So, let's see here. The passage talks about skepticisms towards orthodox explanations. We won't go over that whole paragraph because that's basically that thing that gets repeated throughout the book. So anyway, let me see here. I think that takes care of that section. So moving on to chapter 18 here. This section argues that the concept of development or progress is an attempt to positivize existence and impose artificial limitations on things. So this is getting deep into just major concepts of, I guess, how reality works. And I'm going to sort of skip through some of that because that goes a little bit beyond what I can really sort of comprehend here. And this, let's see here. So it looks like, yeah, that section is all about that. So we're just going to bypass that. Moving on to chapter 19. This one talks about various historical reports of strange things falling from clear skies, including a red rain. I guess, I'm not sure what puffins are, Puffins, and hundreds of dead birds of different species. The narrator, Fort, basically argues that these events challenge conventional science, such as explanations such as winds and storms, instead suggesting extraterrestrial origins there. And then he goes back into this idea of this, what he calls the Super Sargasso Sea. It's one of his major ideas as to where a lot of these objects that fall are coming from, and it's this idea of a place that's above the Earth, where things like plants and animals that are sucked up by water spouts can remain in suspension for months before eventually falling. And I have no idea what to make of that, but that's an amazing concept on its own. There have been reports of dried autumn leaves falling in the spring, and that's suggested evidence of this Super Sargasso Sea, with Fort suggesting that leaves were held there from the prior season. There's also an account of blood-colored clouds and African tree seeds falling in Italy. So that's amazing. Again, with all these stories of these objects falling from other places, the thing that always gets me is it always seems to be just this one object. And if wind is sort of picking all these things up, why is it not picking up anything else? And that's what always gets me about these objects that fall, when there's just one or two different kinds of objects instead of all kinds of things that might be picked up by the wind. So, let's see here. So yeah, that's basically what he talks about in that section. So these odd things that are from other places that seem to fall, or other times of the year that seem to fall in odd places or odd times. So, moving on to chapter 20. Like I said, we'll either finish this show or next one of these shows, because there's about 7 more sections total now. But we are about halfway through the show. So 20. This section describes various unconventional reports of strange objects and shadows seen in the sky, which Fort argues challenge mainstream scientific explanations. Reports are presented of fan-shaped dark triangular objects, unidentified lights, basically, and stationary shadows cast on clouds, which supposedly defy explanation by clouds, balloons, or birds, or other things. Fort entertains fantastical, imaginative interpretations like super constructions hovering over Earth, secret lunar entities, and unknown light-absorbing principles. So there's an account also given of a week-long unexplained light hovering over a park in London that is dismissed by scientists as a street light. Now keep in mind, these are all recordings from the end of the 1900s, or 1800s, I'm sorry, 19th century into the early 20th century. So this is before any major kinds of, like, hovering planes or anything like that, as far as we know. So that is an amazing sighting there. There's let's see here. There's and it just talks about more how that's just scientifically doesn't make sense to a lot of people. So so yeah, that's that chapter. Moving on to 21. This chapter presents multiple accounts of luminous wheel-like objects. That's wheel as in WHEEL, that are seen rotating or moving through the sky and oceans, including some that seem to be of massive size. And as far as scientific explanations, those include optical illusions, meteorological phenomena, and even metaphorical visions. So basically, people seeing things that aren't really there are considered but ultimately rejected by Fort, the author. The luminous wheels are interpreted as possible structural components of superconstructions originating from and traveling between other worlds. Their entry into Earth's atmosphere and submergence into the seas is mentioned. So again, you're getting into, in a way, possibly UFOs and USOs, unidentified flying and or submerged objects. So reports of other events such as phosphorescent water, lights shooting from these wheels, and resulting in physical effects like smashed ship masts. So these are but regular, as in boats that were around at the time, are also reported as evidence for these wheels actually being there, which makes sense in a way. Fort expresses frustration with conventional scientific attempts to dismiss and rationalize these accounts, which I can understand when they're destroying parts of boats and everything. That's pretty extreme right there. So yeah, that's a lot of things happening. Again, that gets back to sort of early descriptions of objects in the air and in the water that don't make sense. So, moving on to chapter 22. This chapter talks about, gives a historic account of an event from 1870 where a strange cloud, in quotation marks, was observed in the sky by sailors aboard a boat called the Lady of the Lake. So, the features of the cloud include a circular form, divided semicircle segments, and geometric complexity and stability, organic appearance, gray coloration, low altitude, and movement against the wind. So it almost sounds like a flying creature of some kind that looks like a cloud. That is an amazing sighting there. This lasted for about 30 minutes before it disappeared due to the darkness of night rather than any kind of dissipation. But so for all they know, it was still there, but they just couldn't see it anymore. But that's an amazing sighting right there. I've never heard of that before. So all the details there make Fort think basically that this is really hard to just dismiss as a regular cloud. So that's basically that chapter right there. Moving on to chapter 23. This one presents several historical reports of unusual metallic objects falling from the sky. These objects include a some different meteorites, large, let me see here, pig iron, they call this other thing here, in North Carolina, a furnace product in Massachusetts, so something that seemed to be made somehow, steel-like material resembling metal works of steel, and the melted iron in Braintree. I'm not sure where that's at. But either way, these are all odd things to be falling from the sky. Ford acknowledges that many of these reports were considered fraudulent, but argues against hastily dismissing such accounts. And I agree with him there. It's one thing, sure, there's things that can be faked, but I agree with him. You should always try to figure everything out instead of sort of leaning one way or the other without knowing what's going on. So, this section talks about how people should be more open to these events. So, let's see here. There's also been explosive disintegration of some reported objects entering Earth's atmosphere, as well as indicative of origin in a different medium. So that's an amazing idea right there. So yeah, that's that chapter, I believe. Yeah, that's that one. So I think we'll end there as far as going through any more of these chapters. Have a few more left, but I don't think there's enough time today. But so this whole book has been amazing. Yeah, there's like three or four more sections, I think, something like that. Yeah, it looks like 3 or 4. So this whole book, reviewing this whole book, and this is again just the first of 4 books, has really been amazing. All the different things that have been seen falling from the sky, and or floating in the sky. That one cloud that looked almost like a creature that almost looked like a ship in a way, or sort of like a UFO in a way. That's also really, that story to me really stuck out. Because you hear about odd clouds today that seem to be shaped like UFOs, and of course there's regular explanations for those. And of course I don't doubt that some of those are regular clouds, but then it makes you wonder, why can't UFOs or other entities sort of use the appearance of clouds as clouds to get by? So, but that's all we have time for today. Thank you all for listening. I'll talk to you all on the next episode of Salcedo Paranormal. Take care.